How's it going, guys? It's Hobby from Marcel 1000. Today is August 2nd, 2020. As today, the main focus will obviously be Tropical Storm Isaias, which is currently just off the coast of Florida. And taking a look at the water vapor imagery, you're seeing that over the past several hours, the storms has really been blowing up with convection as of recently, where we're seeing those clouds begin to expand. And you may be thinking that it's looking like a stronger storm at this point, that since we're seeing more convection and we're seeing the thunderstorms blow up more. And while you could be right in that sense, where we could see this strengthen from currently, which is a 65 miles per hour storm, to maybe 70 or even a low end hurricane at 75 miles per hour, I still think this strengthening will be temporary, because it's usual when tropical cyclones are struggling that they sometimes attempt to blow up thunderstorm convection and fend off a lot of the wind shear and dry air. However, it's only a matter of time before the dry air wins, and in a couple hours we might see these blowups of thunderstorms slow down and this convection slow down, and we might see Isaias become morph into what it was earlier, only a couple hours earlier, where it looked very weak and it looked like it was struggling really bad. And we might see that in the next several hours once this dry air wins out and limits this convection around center of circulation. However, it does indeed seem like it's strengthening at this point. However, I do expect it to maybe weaken before, maybe by the time it reaches Georgia, we may see further strengthening as it begins to break off a little bit from the strong wind shear and dry air that's currently hindering it from really developing into anything major. So right now it does look fairly healthy from what it was earlier, but keep in mind that this could easily change, as it's usual for struggling tropical cyclones to have some moments of blow up in terms of convection, and then other moments where it looks like it's on life support. So don't get too caught up that this is going to strengthen permanently and potentially more than a 75 category 1 hurricane for now. And that's a key word, because I still think that after Florida, we could see maybe permanent strengthening before it makes landfall somewhere in the Carolinas. We have to wait and see. But to show you how strong a wind shear is, you see that the reds represent very unfavorable conditions, which means strong vertical wind shear that's currently over Isaias. And you see that we have 30 to 20 knot winds over upper level winds over Isaias, and that's pretty much stopping the storm from really developing much. But however, I want to point out, as you get more northward, the wind shear starts to die down to more like 15 to 5 knots. I still expect this wind shear to increase as this trough that's coming from the Midwest as it moves towards the East Coast. However, it's not going to be nearly as bad as what Isaias is experiencing right now, and I expect conditions to improve as a result conditions to improve for this thing to develop as a result as it moves up north. However, let's take a look at the radar for Isaias, which is just off the coast of Florida right now and has the chance to bring tropical storm force winds. However, it seems like the storm, as of the 11 o'clock update, has taken that turn up northward. And while there is still a chance that this could meander closer to the Florida coast and take a more westerly direction, I believe that the most likely scenario is that this is going to mainly keep parallel from the Florida coast, as it seemed like Isaias already made that definitive turn, and I don't expect any major weird turns to the west to really occur, since it's likely that the trough that's coming from the Midwest has shifted the upper level winds a little bit and the lower level winds to the point where the to the point where Isaias has finally made that turn up northward, which is definitely good news for the Florida coast, because if this went closer to the west, you might have seen conditions far worse than what you're experiencing right now, and you might have seen the convection and a lot of these thunderstorm squall lines to pretty much impact the Florida coast with tropical storm force wind conditions and maybe wind gusts up to hurricane force, which would definitely be impactful over the Florida coast. I wouldn't say anything major, but it definitely would be somewhat dangerous to be out there in 50 plus mile per hour wind gusts if this storm took the westward track. However, it seemed like it made that definitive turn up north, so for the most part, things should mainly be good for Florida. However, I do want to keep in mind that over the past several hours, like I said, the convection is really starting to blow up in this storm, and in the past several loops, we've been seeing the rain begin to wrap around on the west side, which is showing that this storm is becoming a little bit more healthy, and as a result, we might see some of those thunder showers and thunderstorms move onto the Florida coast. If this meanders just slightly, only several miles can make a major difference to the west. So, in a lot of these thunderstorms, in a lot of these thunder showers and rain bands, this is where the strong winds of Isaias are located. This is where the tropical storm force winds are located. So if any of these thunder showers or thunderstorms make it to the Florida coast, that could be worrying, because you might see tropical storm force conditions then. And I wouldn't rule it out of the question, even though this storm has taken that turn up towards the north, because this storm over the past several hours has been blowing up with convection. So who knows how much longer this storm will blow up with convection, to the point where some of these thunder showers could impact the Florida coast. We just have to wait and see. It's very hard to predict these cycles during a tropical cyclone, where, especially a struggling tropical cyclone, where you need to pretty much hope that there isn't like a sudden blow up of thunderstorms during a struggling tropical cyclone. However, there is still an equal chance that this convection winds down as this dry air begins to take over this tropical cyclone, especially dry air that's currently to the north of it. So we have to wait and see. Florida at this point should at least just hope this storm doesn't really blow up with convection any longer, so most of those bands stay offshore. And however, the good news is that it seems likely that this is mainly going to stay off the coast and parallel to the coast, as Isaias pretty much made that definitive turn up to the north. However, while it's good news for Florida, I want to say that this could be worse news for the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, because since it took the more eastward track, it's less likely, the strength of this storm is less likely to weaken, because it won't deal with the friction of land over Florida, and it's more likely it's going to stay over water if it takes a more eastward track like it is right now. If you take a look at and as for the storm surge in Florida, although this storm may stay off the coast, it's still very important to keep in mind that the storm surge threats, it still will be there. We're still expecting 1 to 3 feet throughout the Florida coast, extending to Georgia, and then potentially 2 to 4 feet in South Carolina, as it's more likely that somewhere in the Carolinas, it's pretty much likely that a landfall is going to occur there. We're not sure what strength it will be. It's likely to be a strong tropical storm, maybe even a low-end hurricane, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So if we take a look at the tropical storm force winds probability, you see that Florida has around a 50% chance of tropical storm force winds. However, I would lower that a little bit as of the 11 a.m. advisory, because this storm has taken the definitive turn up north earlier than most of the forecast models expected. So I would say the chance of tropical storm force wind probabilities are less likely for the Florida coast, which is definitely good news for them. However, since this storm is more offshore, it could mean bad news for the mid-Atlantic states, and I'll go over that right now. For the GFS, here is Tropical Storm Isaias, which is just off the coast of Florida. However, the GFS was slightly wrong in this case because Isaias ended up moving a little bit more offshore than that was initially expected. And the problem with that is that since Isaias is more offshore, it's more likely to have a lot more time over water to maybe re-strengthen over Georgia and even just off the coast of Florida, and then make landfall in North Carolina. And this shift to the north earlier than expected affects the entire East Coast, because now it's more likely that this storm is going to be much closer to the Atlantic Ocean, where it could fuel itself and continue to strengthen despite being over land for a lot of time. It might be just close enough to the Atlantic Ocean to where it might still be developing, or it might still have a lot of fuel over New Jersey or the Delmarva Peninsula or New England to really potentially bring more significant impacts along the coast. And that's definitely not good news. However, another reason why there's a chance that this could strengthen before it makes landfall somewhere in the Carolinas is that while the wind shear is currently strong right now, there's going to be a little bit of a time frame where Isaias might have an open area where the wind shear might be lighter, and to re-strengthen into potentially a low-end Category 1 hurricane. And now, since it's more likely we're going to see this storm stay more out to sea than initially expected, it's more likely it could be likely that this re-strengthens back into a hurricane and makes landfall as a hurricane somewhere in the Carolinas. So if we move forward, this is where the GFS put Isaias. Let's pretend it's a little bit more to the east at this point, like it is right now. And you see that there's a strong upper level winds in this region around 30 knots. That's pretty much hindering this from really strengthening much just off the coast of Florida. However, as we move forward, you begin to see that there's a little bit of an open lane where the wind shear is mainly light, since it seems like this large trough that's currently over the Midwest will eventually absorb this upper level low that's been bringing strong wind shear over Florida, and that's been preventing this from developing. And it'll absorb it to the point where it might give Isaias an open lane for development, re-strengthening. And the GFS points this out because around this point it's at 999 millibars. But if we move forward, the GFS re-strengthens it just before it makes landfall around the Myrtle Beach area, and it's as a result of the relatively light upper level winds in this region, and it's going to have a little bit more time over that warmer than average Gulf Stream water. And keep in mind, this storm is now a little bit more to the east, so it might have that key several hours to re-strengthen into potentially a hurricane and make landfall over North Carolina. And plus, since it is more offshore, the wind shear could be even lighter than where the GFS is placing Isaias right now. So there is a chance that this re-strengthens into a hurricane, and then we could see a stronger tropical storm pretty much impact the entire East Coast from the Carolinas, extending all the way to New England. And that's very important to keep in mind over the next several days. However, regardless of whether it is a tropical storm or a hurricane, when it makes landfall in the Carolinas and extends all the way through New England and mid-Atlantic coast, one thing that's for certain is that you're going to experience a lot of flooding over this region, where we see a moderate chance of flash flooding situation in the Carolinas, and we see a slight chance of flash flooding throughout the mid-Atlantic and northeast coast. So it's definitely something important to keep in mind, that just because it is a tropical storm does not mean you won't experience major impacts in terms of flooding. And you have to keep in mind as well that flooding is the leading cause of death during tropical cyclones. So just because this may be weak going up the East Coast does not mean it can't be deadly. So definitely keep that in mind throughout the East Coast. And in terms of the rainfall, in terms of the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, you see that the National Hurricane Center made a slight shift more to the east to where it could be closer to water, and it could have just enough time to re-strengthen into a hurricane. The National Hurricane Center didn't point this out just yet. However, I still believe that due to the lighter wind shear and the potential of having more time over water might change this forecast, and we might see a hurricane make landfall somewhere in North Carolina, South Carolina, and we might see a strong tropical storm pretty much impact the entire East Coast. And I'm sure you guys along the East Coast remember Tropical Storm Irene. Despite that storm being a tropical storm, when it made landfall in New Jersey and New York, it still brought a ton of impacts and was a $1 billion disaster for a lot of the East Coast. And it seems like it's going to take somewhat of a similar track. Yes, Irene was well farther to the east for most of the time. However, in terms of rainfall and in terms of staying like relatively close to the Atlantic Ocean and impacting the entire East Coast, this does seem very similar to Irene. I'm not saying there's another Irene because all tropical cyclones are different, but definitely do not underestimate these tropical storms, as at this point around 8 p.m. Monday, I would expect maybe this makes landfall as a hurricane, and then or maybe around Tuesday, right around New Jersey, this might be a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. It might get a lot of its fuel from this ocean water, and what's worse is that the water temperatures just off the coast of New Jersey, Long Island, are pretty much around the 80-degree range, and they're well above average for this time of the year. And that might give it enough fuel for this to strengthen as it goes. Well, I wouldn't say strengthen, but it might give it enough time for it to strengthen over the warmer than average water over New Jersey. So it's not like this storm will be going over cooler waters and completely dying out. It's going to still have close contact with the 80-degree water that's currently off the coast of New Jersey. So definitely keep that in mind. And we also might see this storm strengthen and expand in wind field, because this trough is going to have a baroclinic influence on this storm, and as a result we might see this storm lose a little bit of its tropical characteristics. However, it might give it enough instability to where it could hold its own, extending all the way through New England and going into eastern Canada. So that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and maybe Tuesday to Wednesday I might go to the beach to report on Tropical Storm Isaias as it impacts New Jersey, where we could see wind gusts over 60 miles per hour along the New Jersey coast. I can't promise that. I'll let you guys know probably in the next video, and thank you guys for watching.